Hey fellas, before we get in the video, I just want to quickly say that I'm not advocating for or encouraging the doxing, targeting, harassment, or bullying of any individuals that may be mentioned or featured in this video, or this is an opinion piece of my particular commentary on the subject matter, however controversial as it may be. So, without I quickly say it, let's go ahead and start the show. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Japan are back in action. Top of CL today by something else. It's not furry drama for a change. You know, the past several videos, I've been talking about nothing but furry drama. This goes beyond the furry fandom. This goes beyond the Trekkie fandom. This goes beyond the Sonic fandom, the Naruto fandom, the Weeb fandom at large. All of those other fandoms combined, because this affects the World Wide Web at large. And if you think I'm being the least bit hyperbolic here, when I relay to you the circumstances at play, your tune might change. But it really depends on which proverbial side you stand on. Because if you're for the subject matter, in this instance and this instance alone, you might understand the plight of this particular subject matter. If you are against what we're going to be talking about here today, then this might be a moment of celebration for you. I have no idea who you are, what you're all about, but I would just like to go ahead and give a little bit of a visceral reaction to everything. As far as I can remember and recall off the top of my head, the events at play, everything that's been going on, because this really sort of centers on like the last 2 weeks. Technically for several years, but we're not quite there yet. So, there's a little website out there, you might have heard of it, called KiwiFarms. You know, just people coming over and just like, cracking wise at other people's expense. No harm, no foul. You know, they're just having a little bit of good, honest fun, right? Nah. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. There's a lot more layers here to unpack, and I'm just going to have to sort of articulate that to you all as we go along. But this was basically initiated back in 2013. It was headed by a guy named Joshua Moon. He goes by Null on KiwiFarms, or at least he did, but now he's sort of a king overlooking a kingdom that's sunk into the sea. But we're going to get into that in a little bit. KiwiFarms was initiated as sort of a website that was dedicated towards A-logging Christian, basically. And you might notice that in all of Christianity, there came a point in Christian's life where the trolls in his life sort of took a more sympathetic approach towards Christian, because they sort of recognized that Christian was harmless and they couldn't really help themselves. And I'm not saying that was a good relationship that they had, but at the very least, the trolls did try to go out of their way to help Christian. Not all of them, but a good proportion that had indirectly or directly, ruined Christian's life. See, as far as I'm concerned, Christian is the result of a young man that, as they transition from a boy into adulthood, they have two paths. Christian obviously went down the bad path, alright? They transitioned into a woman later, or at least they think they did, and it didn't turn out well for them. But you could just already tell that Christian was never really going to amount to much. And even Bob Chandler, Christian's father, recognized that from an early age. And he even encouraged his son to seek disability from the government, because he sort of recognized that his son, at the time anyway, later daughter, wasn't going to really amount to much. And I know that sounds absolutely shitty for me to say, but I legitimately feel that there was a point in Christian's life that his parents could have had a more direct impact on his life, and if they just tried a little bit harder, and they were there for Christian a little bit more, Christian could have turned out much different than he did today. That didn't happen. So Christian was largely left to his own devices and the internet, and he was always sort of stuck in the mind of a 12-year-old, honestly. He was, had an overactive imagination. He thought the world around him was sort of a cartoon, and it kind of manifested into today, and that's why they're basically hopeless. They relied upon the internet for their own survival, begging constantly at a certain point, because the internet would just give sympathy money towards them. I guess the collective internet at large felt guilty that so many times they fucked with Chris over the years and put him through the ringer, metaphorically, and they would just give hundreds upon thousands of dollars to Christian to just exist as they are. They recognize the damage they did, and that's just my take on it. But Christian is the result of somebody being raised on the internet, by my estimation. You're free to disagree with me, but Christian's parents weren't exactly in the picture all that much, especially when he hit a certain age. But So Christian obviously ceased to be funny because the KiwiFarms wasn't constantly fucking with them as like they had been in the past. So, and this is something that I was going to make in another video, just a point that I wanted to raise. There are other Christians out there, alright? At least the equivalent of. For instance, you might have heard of them. There's the German equivalent of Christian, Drachenlord. You know, like somebody that you would never expect to exist, but does inexplicably. And people are even trying to say that Cyrax, you know, somebody domestic here in the United States, is going to be the next Christian. It's not really my place in this video to speculate as to whether this is all, like, factually true, but I will just say, KiwiFarms had become sort of a repository of information about problematic or, you know, exotic, or as they like to say, eccentric individuals that they sort of attract information and archive it. And it was really to the enjoyment of everybody involved. But, you know, accumulating all this information for the sake of laughing at somebody else's expense, you got to see the best and worst of weaponized autism at play. You know how 4chan has always been, like, sort of claimed as having weaponized autism at its command? Which is why they won over various individuals like Shia LaBeouf when he was playing Capture the Flag. That's a story for another time, but if you know what I'm referring to, that's just one example. There's many more. And this was really sort of like the place, a little bit edgier, but one place out of many that somebody could sort of play, you know, online sleuth. You know, piece together all of these clues to uncover a mystery. My exposure to the website was really through the Kero the Wolf drama, because back then, there wasn't really a whole lot to go on beyond the archives that, like, the screen caps that were leaked out, and, like, a growing denomination of people that were sharing little tidbits of information. KiwiFarms was a one-stop shop to sort of showcase all of it, and obviously the people that supported Kero the Wolf the most had nothing but scorn to express about KiwiFarms. That was a terrible website, that they did all of these terrible, nefarious things, and they were absolutely right, you know? KiwiFarms did all these nefarious things, alright? As far as doxing people, I can't really say in good faith and conscience that KiwiFarms had ever really doxed people. They made your information a little bit more easily accessible through shining a spotlight on it, but for the most part, unless somebody was a very determined hacker or a very, like, sly hacker, this is all information that could sort of piece together from what was already publicly available online, you know? It would take some effort to sort of correlate, you know, identities, as in separating a screen name from a real name or a real address from their IP address, but there were ways to do it without having to resort to engaging in the dark web or hacking or anything like that. So it really came down to the ignorance of the individual, as in the target that they were sort of looking at. One thing I will say, the argument can be made that they had a bad habit of fixating on people, obsessing over people, and that really is the basis by which a lot of people would say that KiwiFarms is an absolutely horrible website. I'm not here to defend KiwiFarms, by the way. I'm just here to say that a variety of, like, different claims can sort of be dissected. What were the motivations of the KiwiFarmers at large? They were out here to have a bloody good lol, alright? They didn't really seem to go out of their way to try to, I guess, swat people or do this, that, or the other. Really, KiwiFarms was meant to be an archiving place and an observatory place. The idea is that they would observe people from a distance and laugh at them. They weren't supposed to get involved in the other person's life or meddle in their affairs like they had with Christian, because they had sort of recognized the damage that they had done, and for the most part, like, they sort of walked that fine line. I'm not saying that all of them did that, because when you're attracting all of these people, like, to your website that openly mock mentally, like, handicapped individuals or go out of their way to, like, you know, tell trans people to commit suicide, that sort of goes beyond just having a bloody good lol, right? That goes into absolutely terrible, decadent, and corrupt territory. They obviously are a little bit morally amoral over there. They don't really seem to have too much of an interest in doing what would be considered decent. But then again, at the same time, KiwiFarms as a website has as much right to exist as 4chan or YouTube or Twitter. And arguably, some people would say that Twitter is even more toxic than KiwiFarms could ever hope to be. I mean, like, I certainly agree with that sentiment. It's just that you had a higher concentration on KiwiFarms than you do on Twitter. And I guess the difference is that the general community, if they find somebody else's behavior or demeanor to be truly problematic, they can mass report people. There are ways for the community to moderate, but by that same token, KiwiFarms did make efforts to self-moderate. They only cared about factual information, and they only cared about, like, sticking to what they were doing, laughing at people from a distance rather than getting involved in their everyday life. See, drama is fun when you can laugh at the drama and at someone else's expense, and you're not involved with it. You're not tethered to it. You're not responsible for it. It's funny just like when you're not involved at all. You're a passing observer just looking at it. Now, here's where we sort of get into the controversy. There is an individual out there that I know as Keffals, the Keffals Kerfluffle, as Mr. Medicare would like to say. Keffals is a transgender individual that had become a live streamer. They like to engage in gaming content. They like to maintain a vast Twitter audience. In fact, they were fighting to get a blue check mark for a long time, and they got it, So, congratulations, Keffals. But here's the thing. Keffals isn't the squeaky clean individual that they try to pass themselves off to be, alright? They openly engage in the same behavior that they accuse KiwiFarms as engaging in. As in, Joshua Moon. Keffals had posted a picture of Joshua Moon and their mother, openly. It was just disseminating this far and wide, making the argument that Joshua Moon was indirectly responsible for everything that had happened to Keffals up to that point. Well, what had happened to Keffals, you might ask? They were doxxed, they were routinely, targeted, they had death threats slung at them, they had threats of violence slung at them. People had allegedly showed up at their place of residence to take pictures of them, or at least the residence in which they resided, and they had to flee to other countries to get away from all the drama. It's sort of like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, except people were actually hot on her trail. They were once male, but no more, and that's not a bad thing. It's just that the more that I looked into Keffals' back history, and the more that I got to see their demeanor online today, effectively right now, they were at first a sympathetic individual. Not anymore. I do not sympathize with them at all anymore. Alright, they sort of went out of their way to be the least bit problematic. And if they're not trying to be malevolent or problematic, then at the very least, they are, painfully oblivious to their own bad actions, because they had gone out of their way, in proving a point, to try to, get minors on HRT, or if you don't know what I'm talking about, hormonal replacement therapy, regardless of whether their parents approved of this or not. And I know that a good many of you out there would be like, well, what business is it of the parents to decide whether or not their children are trans or not? And you know what? That is a fair point to make, okay? There are some individuals out there that experience genuine gender dysphoria, okay? But rather than throwing all caution to the wind and embarking on the transition from male to female or female to male, that would merit a long conversation with a psychologist or various other caregivers out there that can make a determination as to whether somebody is experiencing genuine gender dysphoria or if they're just psychologically confused, because it could really go either way, okay? I'm not here to have that argument right now. I will just like to say that I don't feel comfortable with the idea of minors having access to the information involved to make their own cockamamie bullshit estrogen pills or testosterone pills to try to make the transition on their own. That's something for a caregiver to do. And if you don't believe me, it's just that there's too many risk factors that could result in fucking up your overall health if you're one of those minors out there. But Keffals was trying to make that information public available. If it was just resources, as in people that you can talk to, like psychologists or caregivers or people like that, I'd be a little bit more sympathetic. But considering the fact that this is material on how to get estrogen in you or how to get testosterone in you, that's where I take issue with. Because until you're 18, at least in the United States, you're under your mom and pop's roof or your legal guardian's roof. After that, that's when you get to make independent decisions independent of them. All right, you're out on your own. You get to do whatever the fuck you want or don't want. You can go to school, you can jump into the workforce, you can do this, that, or the other. Obviously, given the fact that things are a lot more expensive now than they were in the past, your options can be limited, and I can sympathize. Somebody that faces genuine gender dysphoria should have the means and at least a way to legitimately plead their case and get the resources that they deserve to make the transition from start to finish. However, until they turn 18, that is really a decision for everybody involved, whether that's really, truly to the well-being of the child, that seeks to go on that process or not. That is not a decision for me to decide, you to decide, or them to just decide, waking up one day. Because people can change their mind. That is a possibility here, all right? You never know. That's why there needs to be sort of checks and balances in place to make sure, absolutely sure, beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt, that minor, is legitimately feeling that they are the opposite gender that they are meant to be. And, from there you can sort of initiate the process and go through the proper channels to get the treatment that they need. That's not a decision for Keffals to make, and they were sort of making this less about the good of the child and more about sticking it to their parents. Regardless of their parents' approval or disapproval, she was going to indoctrinate the kids of these parents, and any parent that was having a problem with it was probably transphobic. That was the implication that Keffals was making. That is the issue that I'm taking with, alright? Not only that, there was a Discord server that was called Catboy Ranch, and it was sort of designed to take in minors that felt like they were the opposite sex, or maybe they were just, part of the LGBTQ community. It went either way because they sort of accepted all. The only problem with this is that they were minors, and there was pornographic material being disseminated. So, the Catboy Ranch doesn't exist as it does now. The current incarnation of Catboy Ranch is a lot more cleaned up and tidy and doesn't really fall in the same ideology as the old one did, but it's something that Keffals was at the head of and bragged about. But that was a long time ago. KiwiFarms sort of consistently kept up with everything that Keffals was engaging in and sort of made that information public. I mean, they did for every lolcow that sort of caught their interest, right? They did it for Kero the Wolf, they did it for Cord Kitty, they did it for a variety of other people out there. Hypnus Sappho, a more recent example, grooming minors and openly advocating for zoophilia. Okay, the interest in Hypnus Sappho didn't end with their quote unquote committing suicide. And the running joke was that this would have been the fourth individual that KiwiFarms was responsible for killing. I am not going to say that KiwiFarms didn't have any influence in the suicides they're allegedly guilty of, but I don't know all of the circumstances at play. I cannot say, beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt, whether or not KiwiFarms is legitimately guilty or innocent in that regard. What I can say is that, given what I already know about the farms in general at large, KiwiFarms has openly said racial slurs and transphobic slurs. They said a lot of abhorrent and disgusting terminology to refer to other people. Whether or not this was for the shock factor or because the person that was posting this legitimately felt that way about the individual, not really something that I can sort of say. I saw some KiwiFarmers that seemed more interested in factual information, whereas other people were the least bit hyperbolic and seemed to engage a lot in the slippery slope theory. So it really came down to the overall culture, that this was a very... How can I put this the best way? This is a very crude sort of culture. This is sort of a throwback to pre-2002, internet days, where you could be as mean and nasty as you possibly wanted to be, just for the sake of being mean and nasty, alright? And that's significant because a lot of people that sort of looked at the website, even in a passing glance, would say that KiwiFarms seem to be nothing but more than a hive of scum and villainy, tantamount to 4chan as a good example. The difference is 4chan is still up. Wonder why that image board is still up like it is, and why KiwiFarms went down as it did. I have multiple theories. Notice how everybody was so fixated on cataloging and archiving any piece of information they possibly could about a given target. This is significant because a lot of targets they went after were pedophiles and zoophiles. I cannot sanction the derisive terminology that they refer to other people as, but I will say the fact that they went out of their way to try to nail pedophiles and zoophiles to the wall by actually getting involved, contacting local law enforcement if they were aware of their locale, that's the least bit admirable. If there's anything that I can congratulate the farms on, it's that one thing. The problem is everything else that they've sort of engaged in being absolutely disgusting and abhorrent to everybody involved. Their interactions with anybody out there just being absolutely nasty and disgusting for little to no reason beyond the shock factor. It's no surprise to me that the growing denomination across the World Wide Web is condemning KiwiFarms. So, how did they get so much attention so fast? Well, somebody had swatted or had been engaged with swatting a Republican senator, and the Republican senator basically took the moment to say that this website should not exist, even though anybody can swat somebody else and say, oh, KiwiFarms did it. I don't think a legitimate Kiwi farmer did that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did anyway, because the problem with KiwiFarms is anybody can become a member of the KiwiFarms. The problem is the KiwiFarmers would be the least bit, recognizing of this simple fact, because they would basically go out of their way to try to self-monitor and self-moderate themselves in the interest of keeping the status quo, established, They didn't like people making wild and crazy allegations about somebody unless there were details. They wanted the deets, okay? They wanted the receipts. They wanted something legitimate in their hand that they could sort of pour over and make an independent, educated decision upon. Because anything that fell outside of that, they would just ridicule you. They would treat you like the target that you're trying to raise awareness about. They wanted the deets. They wanted the receipts. They wanted to say names. They wanted numbers. They wanted everything involved, all the information for them to pour over. It was through this combined effort that they would sort of make threads. That's what they were called. This was basically a glorified forum site that they would sort of attract and accumulate all of this information on and to form archives. Everything was archived. They would try to get everybody else to archive information because archives survive when somebody goes out of the way to try to delete content that they themselves had either posted online or had made publicly available, or somebody else outed them, like private DMs or private messages. The forms of quote-unquote evidence would come in a variety of different ways. Wheeling it back to Kero the Wolf, obviously there was anytime that you have one of these big individuals that think they're too big to fail, they try every fucking trick in the book to weasel their way out of the public spotlight. They don't want to be in the limelight. They do not want to be sort of fixated upon by the general public. They want to maintain their reputation up to that point. They want to, basically escape their own past bad actions unscathed. And that's why honesty is really the best policy, because the more that you lie and deny, people are going to recognize that, and they're going to try even harder. Even the Streisand effect. You try to cover something up that's the least bit innocuous, that innocuous thing is going to attract all the attention, and then everything around it is going to wheel back to you. So, the KiwiFarms, they were just interested in, the straight dope. They wanted factual information. That's how you got so many, absolutely terrible individuals cataloged on there. Like I said before, Kero the Wolf, Cord Kitty, various other individuals. Even in a passing glance, they focus primarily on zoophiles and pedophiles. Because that's pretty terrible. The he said, she said bullshit, that might get a chuckle. That might get various other reactions from the KiwiFarmers. But, pedophilia and zoophilia, that's truly abhorrent. They were fighting what they called sexual degeneracy. Who died and made them the martyrs here? As far as the crusaders that would decide who was engaging in sexual misconduct, who was not. Because they would kink shame, all right? If they found out that you had a kink that sort of fell outside of the status quo, they'd make fun of you for it. So, I know for a fact that some of you are diaper furs. Damn well they would make fun of you for that. So not trying to like kink shame you. I'm just saying, like, as an example, they would have some very colorful comments sort of sling your way. So, getting a little bit off topic, but it's important for you to sort of understand how KiwiFarms at large work. They were not a hive mind, although they operated like they did, okay? They would basically encourage their own community members. Do not share too much information about yourself, or we will sort of point and laugh at you. Don't try not to make a public spectacle of yourself. Be as mean and nasty as you want. Just, don't get into it with other like Kiwi farmers. You'd see like occasional spats, but it was really a bunch of independently minded individuals, the Kiwis, as it were, coming together with the sole purpose of a shared interest in laughing at other people's expense. That's it. Having a bloody good lull. Now, here's where it gets a little bit darker than that. There have been allegations that they sort of like engaged in internet stalking people, alright? They would obsessively keylog anything that somebody was doing and stalk them, alright? So, is that really... I don't know about cyber stalking. Like, it really comes down to the individuals involved, but when you have a whole group of people and each one of them shares one identifying piece of information about the target, then that's a little bit going beyond like just having a bloody good lull, right? You're pretending to be a bunch of like internet sleuths and detectives trying to uncover a mystery. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So like the assessments made by like the furry fandom and normies at large, I can't really argue with the idea that this is a hive of scum and villainy. What I will say is that Keffals, I don't think they were motivated simply because they've been swatted, because what I remember is that Keffals specifically went out of their way to fuck with the KiwiFarms, and then when the KiwiFarms came out to sort of retaliate, that's when all of this drama sort of happened. They dropped everything they were doing, and they were starting this campaign of destroy KiwiFarms. And like, the one thing that sort of was the deciding factor here was that Cloudflare. Now, Cloudflare is just a proxy. They're a proxy that would provide protection for KiwiFarms. See, when DDoS like attacks happen, and they would happen a lot of the time, like DDoSing, it's the like mass denial of service. So DDoSing is basically where like the requests keep coming in, but the server cannot keep up with all of these requests, and they become overwhelmed and overrun. And routinely, that's the one thing that would seem to happen to like KiwiFarms. Incidentally, the same problem that Fur Affinity would have for many years now, but maybe KiwiFarms had a better excuse than Fur Affinity did. Because Fur Affinity seems to be like operating on the same aged archetype as it did back in the past, but I digress. So KiwiFarms was always at the mercy of whichever service provider they could get as far as having protection, like even minimum protection from the various ails like of what the internet could throw at it. Because when you're sitting here cataloging all this identifying information about very dastardly individuals out there in the World Wide Web, you're bound to make a couple enemies, right? Like, there are various people out there that do not want you to exist as a website because you have this vast repository of information that could be detrimental to their own standing and well-being, right? Right. That's why it gets a little bit more suspicious, because I can't help but feel that Keffals was a convenient patsy. Like, they're a good individual they can sort of point at and be like, oh yeah, Keffals won against KiwiFarms. That's great. That's fantastic. We can all go on home, right? Keffals is just an influential person. They're one of those influence out there that you keep hearing about. I don't think they were really that instrumental in, like, causing KiwiFarms to collapse from the inside out, alright? Because if you're wondering how KiwiFarms collapsed, Cloudflare initially did not budge when Keffals actually reached out to them, and various other people sort of reached out to them and said, hey, did you know that your client is like an absolutely disgusting website that is catering to the absolutely worst people imaginable in the world? You need to tear it down. And Cloudflare basically told him to fuck off initially, but later on, this is where it gets a little bit weird. Supposedly, Cloudflare did a 180 on their decision because, they dropped KiwiFarms. Actually, that's not entirely accurate. They didn't so much as drop KiwiFarms. They dropped them, but not in the way that you think. They actually blocked like access to KiwiFarms. So technically, KiwiFarms still exists. You can still access it. A couple different ways that you can access it, but I'm not going to go ahead and tell you which ones. This would... Okay, so I am not advocating any of you to do what I'm going to be like telling you in the next 5 seconds. But if you have access to Tor and the dark web and various other things, and you're knowledgeable in that regard, you can feasibly access the KiwiFarms through that means. But that is questionably legal. I am not advocating or endorsing that you do that. In fact, I would highly discourage you not to do that, okay? So do not try to access the KiwiFarms. However, you can access archives and see like past threads that were like archived in the past. That less permissible. What's suspicious about that is the Wayback Machine is the only archive provider, like only archive service that did not sort of like allow for KiwiFarms to be accessible at all. Supposedly a variety of different people went out to the Wayback Machine and basically pled their case and said, hey, KiwiFarms is disgusting and terrible and is transphobic. You need to block any access to this website, alright? And the Wayback Machine appears to have capitulated. Just like Cloudflare capitulated to the mob. Because Cloudflare, they basically found, certain terminology and certain language used on the website to be the problematic. Like, problematic opinions, but more importantly, threats to human life. As in, terroristic threats to human life. Now, here's the problem. It's a question of whether this was a legitimate kiwi farmer that was making wild and crazy threats towards anybody that was involved with all this. Somebody screen capped it, maybe said to Cloudflare, hey, you need to check this out. Or if, and this is sort of getting into conspiracy theory territory, if this was somebody that jumped in at the last second to make a KiwiFarms account, made all these threats knowing that would make KiwiFarms look bad, and knew exactly what to pinpoint their attention to when they said to Cloudflare, hey, you need to look at this because this is particularly problematic. All right, you need to take action against, this website. And that's what happened. It's a theory, okay? You're free to disagree with me because there's plenty of material on that website that was absolutely problematic to begin with. But as far as more recent action, it just seems so perfect, so convenient that Cloudflare, in spite of not withstanding or capitulating to the mob, that they would just stand by their principles until there was an allegedly terroristic threat made to the life and well-being of everybody involved. And Joshua Moon even publicly stated after the fact, we were not approached by law enforcement. We were not approached by the FBI. We were not approached by anybody that happened to be in an executive position as to why there was a terroristic threat to human life made on this website. We have specific rules in place that would discourage this kind of behavior. So, and Joshua Moon, he's not too much older than I am, or maybe too much older than some of you all. He's a fairly young guy, and he was taking on this lonely vigil of being the real OG of the KiwiFarms. He got doxxed a while back. It was the whole Christian, Isabella Loretta Janke, that whole debacle. That's where it came out. Joshua Moon was suddenly doxxed, that his name was suddenly synonymous with KiwiFarms. So if you're curious as to how we all know his name now, it's because of that little sort of tidbit of information. Also, I would imagine that Chris Chan would inadvertently dox Joshua Moon, just let his name be known to the World Wide Web, but that's where it happened. Anyway, so where do we stand today? Well, what's interesting is that the KiwiFarms briefly came back up. It was under a Russian domain name, as in, at the very end of KiwiFarms, it was .ru. From Russia, with love, okay? My love for you is red hot. The Russian domain name dropped them shortly thereafter, so that was very short-lived, and now they're back to square one with Cloudflare. And please do not quote me on any of this because I have no idea about how websites work beyond the bare basics. But when you have a service provider that has like, offer you all this protection, they can reroute you somewhere else. So another service provider that offers the same DDoS protection as Cloudflare did would have to step in and be the recipient to this rerouting. Joshua Moon, to my knowledge, as of right now, cannot find another service provider that's willing to take KiwiFarms under their wing. He just can't. And, like, everybody knows it. Like, even normies now know of the existence of KiwiFarms, because up to that point, it was sort of an obscure website that only people that were well-versed in internet culture would have any awareness about what it was and what it was all about, alright? And even then, it wasn't widespread knowledge. Like, you couldn't just, like, look to anybody in the furry fandom and be like, yo, did you check out KiwiFarms last night? Hell, most furries didn't even want to check out KiwiFarms, because they were at least a bit transphobic and racist and, like, discriminatory. It was kind of questionable, because, like, I got to see the initial speed bumps that led us up to this point. And some KiwiFarmers, they just acted like business was usual. Like, they didn't care. They figured that the website would be back and up and running. But other people, they kind of buckled as soon as there was a sign of trouble. And you really got to see how, like, yellow belly some of these KiwiFarmers were. Like, they were just like, please, this is the only place where I can go to be happy. There's literally fuck all the rest of my life where I can be myself. KiwiFarms is the only place. Please, don't let it go down. And by the way, if any KiwiFarmers are here to, like, listen to me hear me say that, don't fucking lie. I definitely saw messages like that hit Twitter and various other places across the internet, okay? And you basically outed yourself as being that sad, pathetic sad sap that's in their ex-wife's parents' basement, at the, like, 98, like, running computer, trying to, like, desperately live out the glory days. Don't be that bitch, like, that tries to, like, pass off that you're not, okay? And again, I'm not trying to call out the KiwiFarms at large. I honestly recognize them for who they are and what they are, but, like, I couldn't help but, like, notice that some of you appear to have been shaken. Like, your will was shattered the minute that the site went down. So, yeah, not exactly the hard asses that you were trying to pass yourselves off to be. The others, I recognize some by name because I've seen them in so many threads. And we're actually going to be talking about a particular topic of interest in the near future that pertains to the KiwiFarms. Don't worry, I took my screen caps ahead of time, because unlike other YouTubers out there, I don't need the KiwiFarms to make videos, okay? But yeah, like, okay, so wheeling it back. Keffals, it's more about their personality and the way they conduct themselves online that marks them as an absolutely insufferable individual, because they seem to be the ones that are just like, they're gonna fight the, like, source of hatred by using hatred themselves. So they are not above hypocrisy if it means, like, going after this website that they seem, like, particularly motivated to tear down, not because it's for the good of the internet at large, but it's because that a good repository of information that's identifying to them is just out there, and it would be the least bit problematic if they just let that exist, because that would sort of adulterate the decisions that other people could make about them, which, if you have a thread out there, don't you think that it would be problematic if you could just look up somebody's name and you find a, like, docs of them or a repository of information? It seems more personally motivated than by the good of the internet, but they had support, and I saw a good number of furries out there step up to plate, sort of offer their support, even if it was just moral support. So, yeah, whatever. Me personally, I'm not really all that choked up about the KiwiFarms sort of, like, waffling going under. What I will say is I feel like they had the right to exist, but I can't really fault any of the individuals involved jumping on the bandwagon of going after them, full piss and vinegar, like, tearing them down, because, like, they were going into some pretty raunchy territory, and there wasn't a single person on the website that could really say had a squeaky clean reputation. If you're, like, I had considered making, like, an alt account and, like, just existing on the website as a lurker, but I decided against it. I just could not. I can't really, in good faith and conscience, do something like that. Would that mean, like, what would you all think if I had an account on KiwiFarms? How would you all react? I'll go ahead and spill the beans about what I would have done. I was going to do a throwback to like the prequel to Homestuck. There was a little like webcomic called Problem Sleuth. I was going to be Problem Sleuth. I wasn't going to swear. I wasn't going to engage in any like problematic opinions or anything like that. I wasn't going to be transphobic, racist, or like, you know, homophobic or anything like that. I would just pretend to be one of them and sort of like share information if it meant nailing a pedophile or a zoophile. I was considering it, and it was going to be a big reveal later that I could have made a video out of, but I just couldn't. Like, not in good faith and conscience, because, like, I already have enough shit on my plate right now as a YouTuber, like here, with, like, far more important things to attend to, like projects that I want to get back into, IRL, like, improving as an individual. I got, like, all of this to look forward to than to support a website that honestly knew what it was doing was wrong. But, like, who was doing the wrong? Well, we already talked about it. By and large, the KiwiFarmers, they don't engage in doxing unless it's publicly available information, and they don't typically go out of their way to harass individuals. However, they will try to call the police or the authorities if it means nailing a pedophile, zoophile, or, like, you know, saving someone's life, I would imagine. Now, here's what the allegations, like, you know, go towards. And KiwiFarms did, like, no favors for itself in this regard. They're known as going out of their way to dox people, to spread that information far and wide, to, like, uncover somebody's true identity online and make them look like an absolute idiot, and also potentially endanger their life, okay? That's the public perception that people have of KiwiFarms. Whether or not they're guilty or innocent in that regard, that's really up for you to decide, because I've seen it both ways, alright? I've seen some KiwiFarmers that understand when too much is too much. I've seen other Kiwis go far beyond that point alone. Like, it's a very fine line. They would cross over it and rub it away with their fucking foot if it meant getting the sweet, sweet satisfaction of one-upping somebody. Few and far between, but like some other people would observe, and they would just, like, express this in passing fancy. They felt like their perception of the of the KiwiFarms is that 20% of the people are sociopathic assholes that are intentionally manipulating the rest of the internet to, like, for their own personal, like, well-being and gain. And that gain is in keks, as in they would laugh at somebody else's expense. 80% of the website, by their estimation, were useful idiots that would contribute in this farce to perpetuate the status quo in, like, finding this endless number of individuals out there to sort of, like, stimulate, like, you know, the noggin and to have fun at their expense. It certainly wasn't too good for Christian's life and well-being, but, like, everybody else after that, I guess the argument can be made either way. What I will say is it seems awfully fucking convenient that, in spite of the fact that they've existed since 2013, they have done all of this, like, you know, existing almost for 10 years now. This would be 9 years. So, like, they only had another year to go. Maybe several, like, some months and some change. But it seems crazy to me that only now, after all of this kerfluffles with Keffals and, like, everybody involved and everybody sort of campaigning against KiwiFarms, it seems awfully fucking convenient to me that now they're the problem. Granted, some high-profile people did get swatted, including Keffals, so, you know, I guess the powers that be saw this as a grand opportunity to sort of actually put, like, the screws to KiwiFarms, maybe wipe it away. And some people, they're actually going out of their way to say that because KiwiFarms was a repository of information, because they would go out of their way to try to collate all this information about all these individuals out there, it was going a little bit beyond just being a satirical website that was having a bloody good lull at other people's expense. That was getting to the point that was, like, potentially threatening the reputation and well-being of some more important people out there. So, what do you all think? Like, really, this is... I basically just sort of, like, this is a visceral reaction. This is loosely researched, because this is really going off of everything I was aware of up to this point, alright? I could sit here and talk for hours on end, but I know for a fact that we gotta cut this video off somewhere. Joshua Moon is still trying, and where are we going to go from here? I would imagine that like KiwiFarms is going to come back in some sort of iteration or some other incarnation, some other form. Otherwise, it's going to be prepared crippled like 8chan is. Those are stories for another day. Obviously, I want to focus on KiwiFarms because we had a lot of memories, you know. My heart goes out to the YouTubers out there that relied too heavily on KiwiFarms for their source of information, because me personally, I try to keep my ear to the ground and I try to either come upon a topic of interest organically or learn from it on my own. I don't really see, ever since the Kero the Wolf debacle, while I would visit the KiwiFarms as sort of a source of interest, I tried never to rely upon it like I did before, you know? Like, Kero the Wolf was the only time. Any other time, it's like, it always made me feel dirty, you know? Seeing the absolute raunchiest things that people would say. So, that's why in most of my videos, you notice that I post tweets. And the tweets aren't necessarily proof or markers themselves. Think of it more as, like, writing on the wall. Graffiti from the general public. That these are the opinions of your peers and fellow furs, or denizens of the internet at large, okay? You can take what they're saying as a good point, or you can take it as sort of just like, you know, the hyperbolic nonsense somebody would be espousing in relation to whatever topic of interest we happen to be discussing at that day. Either way, there's a good many people that I would imagine are going to be crying after tonight, because KiwiFarms as a repository of information, unless it exists in those archives and you can somehow access those, or you're willing to sort of like engage in going into the dark web and endangering your own well-being, and more importantly, your computer's well-being, by going into the deep darkness to try to get your straight dope and your facts straight. Or maybe you could get lucky on the archive. Maybe it's like pulling the slot machine. Maybe you're going to enter that right, correct URL at the right time, and you're going to be able to determine what you're looking for. Because I don't know how archives work. I just know that other people were great or terrible at archiving things. That's why I screen cap everything, because the screen cap is a picture, okay? It's going to exist where I put it. It's not going to disappear or be at the mercy of the service provider that is archiving all this bullshit. But that's really a conversation for another day. What do you all think? Are you all like cheering and having a bloody good time, like at KiwiFarms' expense, now that it's sort of been eviscerated from the internet? Not really eviscerated, but the general public can no longer access the website, so it's on its way out. Or do you think that this is sort of a shift in sort of like the times? Do you think that with the passing of KiwiFarms into the great yonder, that this is like sort of spelling out, you know, a strike against freedom of speech? That the Wild West days of the internet are become slimmer and slimmer. That things have to be, you know, sort of sanitized for the general public to consume. Otherwise, it has to exist underground. I mean, the closest example I can possibly think to KiwiFarms that, you know, an individual like you and I could perpetuate is the chess club that Isabella Loretta Janke was perpetuating. Real quick before we cut the video off here, because it's getting kind of late. Isabella Loretta Janke, when she was sort of operating at Texas Tech University, she and her posse of followers, they had a Discord server where they used it as a repository of information to determine new targets, people they wanted to bully, people they wanted to fuck with, people they wanted to make fun of. It was called the Chess Club of that particular university because they needed a convenient fallback to sort of masquerade as a legitimate like chess club. All right, they weren't fucking talking about chess, and they damn well weren't playing chess. They were basically talking about new future targets or like people they found like weird or bizarre. That's the connotation that's sort of coming to mind, and you know absolutely how abhorrent Isabella Loretta Janke was, right? Or IBJ if you prefer. I call her Jinkies because she looked exactly like Velma. Slightly more polished Velma, but a Velma nonetheless. But she was an absolutely disgusting individual that was trying to get Christian to commit suicide. And I know a good many of you would hope the same, like now, after the fact, but who do you think sort of egged Christian on? So, last thing I want to talk about before I let you all go. The topic of suicide. You remember how Isabella Loretta Janke was had contributed to the suicide of a trans girl because for whatever reason, Bella absolutely hates trans people. I sort of look at the website KiwiFarms, and I ask myself, what did the members of the KiwiFarms do? Because here's the thing. If they were just posting whatever they're posting on the website itself, and it only stayed on the website itself, it didn't go beyond the website, it just stayed there, then I can't really fault KiwiFarms, now can I? It really comes down to the individual to go out of their way to verify what the KiwiFarms are saying about them. Now, if they were of their own free will and volition using Discord, Telegram, or Twitter, or any other number of social media platforms to go after the individual, bombarding them, overwhelming them, and going after them and attacking them for just existing as a trans person, then yeah, I would say they're absolutely guilty as sin. I know that one of you had basically said that one of your friends had been harassed to the point of suicide. And if you feel comfortable with it, I invite you to leave a comment below telling your story, and that's certainly something we can talk about. But again, I got no dog in the race. I got no horse in the race. As far as KiwiFarms going under, I would say that's more of a sign of the times, and I'm not really here to defend or encourage, condemn their actions. It's whatever. I'm like that lady from TF2, where it's you're all failures when you get a draw. That's how I feel about Keffals, and that's how I feel about KiwiFarms. This is not a story of heroes or villains. This is a shit show, okay? Everybody involved is the least bit problematic in their own way, and I can't really, in good faith and conscience, advocate one or the other. They're all shit, okay? Even Joshua Moon, and I don't have a particular beef to pick with him, but if you're perpetuating a hate website like that you knowingly are just having all these shitty people, I can't really fault you when the entire internet at large decides to go after you one day. But what I can say is, as far as the KiwiFarmers themselves, broken down to their least common denominator, would you not say that this is the internet at large? How toxic you've seen people get on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook even, on Discord. I don't think KiwiFarms is necessarily alone in all of this, right? They're the most concentrated, sure, but I've seen people just as toxic, if not more so, in the furry fandom at large, in the internet at large, beyond KiwiFarms. Just something to think about, Who are the real monsters here? And I'm not trying to do that old cliche, but I've seen people that had engaged in absolutely despicable behavior, and either because they were transgender, because they were furry, because they were black, because they were white, because they were Hispanic, whatever tagline somebody out there would sort of point at as sort of a signifying factor that sort of allowed them to dodge all criticism, all controversy, they got to walk scot-free, in spite of the litany of crimes they had left in their wake. That's going to just about do it for this video. More on the loss of KiwiFarms, press F if you respect the KiwiFarms. If you do not respect the KiwiFarms, go ahead and post a comment. Let's talk about, why you're absolutely glad that KiwiFarms is out the way. Alright? Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Till next time, guys, take care and peace. I hope you all have a better one. Hey fellas, thanks for watching the video today. I really hope you all enjoyed it. Would you care to hit that like button to subscribe for more? I really appreciate that, right? And hey, if you're in the mood for gaming, why don't you check me out on Twitch sometime? Link in the description below. Anyway, till next time guys, take care and peace. I hope you all have a better one.